Alright, so before we get into this massive fucking list, I want to clarify that the up until Brack was made before the Tupan Dactylus update. However, the rankings didn't really change at all because Tupan wasn't a giant addition to the game. So, yeah, take that as you will. Anyway, let's get into the list and the criteria and stuff. Alright, so what's up, fellas? You guys read the title. This is ranking every single creature in Dinosaur Arcade from worst to best. Now, here's two things. First, criteria is split into three parts. One, and the most important part, is survivability. Can you outrun what can kill you? Can you fight off what can kill you? How easy is it to kill what you're playing as in terms of escapability? Like, if you can't escape something and it kills you super easily, and that goes the same for every single creature, that makes your creature bad in survivability, so it would be lower. The second part is general combat, which is just combat like whilst playing, as in more or less survival game combat. And then the third and least important criteria is war combat. We didn't really use this a whole lot other than when things were super difficult to distinguish. So saying that, this is not a PvP tier list. This is a ranking worst to best in terms of survivability and more or less from a survival game perspective. So yeah, jumping straight into it, at last place is lungfish. I don't have much to say. It's just kind of a bad fish. It's the worst. But yeah, lungfish. Next, we have lepidotes and coelacanth. I really can't say a whole lot about these two. They're literally just fish. I can't say much else. They're just fish like lungfish, except for lungfish can go on land. That's it. Next after those three, we have Dodo, which is the worst, or the second worst terrestrial creature in the entire game. Not a whole lot to say on Dodo. There is a cool strat where you can fling yourself off the volcano to escape certain things. Basically everything, actually. But yeah, other than that, not a whole lot to say. Just statistically bad, and it holds it back. Yeah, that's Dodo. Next, we have Carno, and people may be scratching their head right now, being like, "What the? Carno's my favorite creature to play as. Why is it so low? I love playing Carno," and it is literally because Carno is statistically fine. It can escape a lot of things. However, its stamina is somewhat lackluster at 3,500 for a start. Secondly, whilst being the fastest creature in the game, it cannot utilize its speed because its hit reg is so bad that it cannot kill the things that it can catch and kill with its decent statistics. Anything statistically better than it, it can't beat either. So it's not a case like Utah or Smilodon or anything like that where you're statistically weak, but you may be able to beat the things that are statistically better than you. Carno can't do that because of its hit reg and because of its lackluster jump, its lackluster stamina, or well, not lackluster, but mid stamina. The only thing it has is speed. It can run away from things very easily, but other than that, from a survival game perspective, it can't eat very easily on other players, and it can't fight. It just runs, which puts it pretty low. But yeah. Next we have, you guys guessed it, even more fish. We have Onchopristis, gar, or alligator gar, and sturgeon in no particular order. Gar probably should be the worst though, as it has the worst hit reg of the three. Onchopristis and sturgeon are somewhat interchangeable, with Onchopristis having a very, very good DPS, just struggling to hit things and statistically being somewhat weak. Other than that, yeah, pretty good. Sturgeon has the best hit reg, Onco has the best DPS. Good fish. Next we have the interchangeable duo, Jake and Kulasukas. Jumping straight into them, Jake is quite a bit more like tanky because of its defense than Kula. In terms of its damage taken, whilst Kula has a bit more health, quite a bit more attack. Jake is faster in the water a little bit, Kula is a bit faster on land. They're kind of just interchangeable. Um, Jake can fling itself out of the water, so if you really think that that's more beneficial than Kula's like larger attack and larger health than Jake, then sure, you can put Jake higher than Kula. Um, but yeah, not a whole lot to say on these two. Kula can be a good ambush creature if it needs food. Otherwise, Kula can kind of just survive on fish, as can Jake. But yeah, Kula, pretty good. Jake, pretty good. This is starting to get into the creatures that aren't bad per se. They're just outclassed by other creatures. Or not outclassed, but worse, shall we say, than other creatures in terms of their survivability from a survival game perspective. So yeah, take with what you will on the next creatures or on the previous creatures, but this here is the turning point of, damn, these creatures are kind of starting to get decent. Everything below this is kind of like just shit. Not very good. So yeah, Jake and Kula, pretty interchangeable. Yeah, not a whole lot you can say on them. Jake is a lot more defensive. Kula is a lot more offensive. Both make a pretty good dichotomy together. They actually work well together in a pack as well. So yeah. Next we have Baryonyx. So Baryonyx isn't bad by any means. Baryonyx is just in a weird spot right now. In that when it's on land, it is kind of just fodder for other mid tiers. However, when it's in the water, it is kind of the bane of like some things' existence. However, Parogamus, Rhizotis, things, Suchomimus, even Kula and Jake to an extent, all pressure it. Those things all can give Barry a run for its money. The reason I'm putting Barry higher than Jake and Kula is because Barry can not only beat those things in the in majority of circumstances, but Barry can also simply just run away from those things on land if it needs to. The difficult thing with Barry is it kind of has to play near the shore all the time. On land, it can get killed by things like Serato, Allo. Even if herbivores really want to fuck with Barry, they can. Mid-tier herbivores give it a plethora of issues. And also, if there's fish in the server, Barry also has to worry about those. And that's not even including Spinos, Hippos now. Just things that are bigger than it and can bully it around. So, yeah, Barry's not bad per se, it's just in a tough spot right now. If certain creatures were nerfed, Barry would go up. But, yeah, Barry statistically, fine. Barry's just kind of your run-of-the-mill generalist right now. It kind of relies on fish a lot, I feel, unless it's in a pack with other creatures, but especially as a solo, Barry really struggles, especially against other players. So, yeah, that's Barry. Really not bad, but, yeah, it's just okay. It's just an okay creature. It's pretty decent, but it has some issues. Alright, next we have Big Ornithomimus, aka Giga Raptor. When this thing released, it was easily one of the best creatures in the game. Now, not so much. It can outrun basically everything that can kill it. The only issue comes in that it can't really fight anything. The things that can catch it, or some of the things that can catch it, especially if they ambush it, can kill it pretty easily. So it puts it in a somewhat tough spot. Combat-wise, it's not very good. Survivability-wise, it's okay. It's not great. But, I do think that it can be good in certain situations for combat, especially if you need something that is fast to run things down that isn't a pushover like Carno. But in general, I just think that it's really not great. It's not bad, but it is also just not good. It's in a similar situation to Barry in that if certain things were nerfed, it would go up. So it's not that this creature is bad, it is just that the meta doesn't really, or like in general, the game doesn't really accompany it well. It's not great for fighting off things like packs of Smilodons now and Utah packs and whatnot, and those are somewhat common. So, and just because of that, it kind of makes it struggle. It's really just difficult to justify putting it higher. War combat wise, it's not great. Regular combat wise, it's not great. And survivability wise, it's not great either. So yeah, it's just kind of there. I do think it's better than Baryonyx though, due to its stats. It can fight off some things, and it doesn't get pushed around by every single mid tier like Baryonyx does. So yeah, that's Giga Raptor. Just your standard big Ornithomimus. If you want to play as Orny, or if you want to play as an omnivore but don't like how weak Orny is in terms of its stats, Gigaraptor's your only option right now. So, not a whole lot to say on this next one. This is Shinosaurus, and Shinosaurus is the smallest sauropod in the game right now, and it's kind of just not very good. Not a whole lot to say about it. It's just underwhelming statistically, and that's kind of just it. It's better than the creatures before it, but not better than the creatures above it in terms of survivability or combat in general. Shino is kind of just mid, but it's not bad though. It's just mid. Next, we have fish, but better. These fish are just statistically good. They're usable for basically whatever you want. Rhizotus can pick off creatures in the water. Parogamus is kind of tanky, so you can use it for that. Not a whole lot to say on them, other than Parogamus is probably the worst of the two, just because Rhizotus has got such high damage that it's kind of useful in some cases over some other creatures. Next, we have the tiny little monster himself, Kentro. Kentro in Dinosaur Arcade is pretty awesome. Although the problem, or the reason it's so low now, is because it recently got a nerf that makes it so that Allo can kill it in one more hit, and various other things can as well, which makes Kentro a little too squishy from my liking. And Xeno and Yoshi and Drago, everyone I made this list with, they all agreed that Kentro's a little too, or that one hit changed Kentro's viability quite a lot, survivability wise. However, Kentro is pretty awesome. There's a lot of creatures that it can just overwhelm, like Kula, Jake, Masto. You can overwhelm Allos if you land a couple of hits first. Serato has to be very careful of Kentro. Now not as much though at all because of the nerf. Being able to hit a Kentro once and just be somewhat safe to tank is kind of awesome for Serato players. They don't have to be as worried about Kentros. But Kentro's still obviously a pretty big threat. Kentro's got really good, or pretty good DPS. It's faster now, however, it does have a little bit less health. Having the defense that it does makes it pretty tanky, but yeah, its nerf is definitely somewhat noticeable because it would have been quite a bit higher. It probably would have been above things like Styra if it wasn't adjusted. It wasn't really a nerf, but it was an adjustment that changed it for the worse. So it was an indirect nerf. And, my voice cracked. But yeah, Kentro, really good, but not one of those creatures that you can just throw super high up anymore as a result of it having slightly less health. But yeah, Kentro's pretty cool. Next we have Allo, and some people are probably scratching their heads like, why is Allo so low? And it's because Allo's probably the worst mid-tier carnivore now. specifically for our criteria for combat, Allo's pretty good. If you can see your opponent coming, or they don't see you coming, you are probably going to be able to kill them. Allo's probably the best mid-tier for fighting pseudo-apexes, like Suko, like Iguanodon. You're generally going to be able to fight bigger creatures if you're skilled enough. And with Allo's biggest benefit being in groups, it's probably just the best starter for combat. But like we said, it's not entirely about combat. And from a survival game standpoint, Allo's got a ton of pressure from creatures that are just better than it. Serato being able to, or being faster than Allo and being capable of still killing Allo, especially after Serato's somewhat recent adjustment and Allo's somewhat recent adjustment. Actually, they might not be recent anymore, but they were adjusted a while ago, and Serato, given how Serato generally should be played if you're playing it as a survival game, then Serato should be beating Allo a majority of the time. And Concavenator's also just able to escape Allos really easy. And Concavenator's more or less just a less combat efficient Serato that can swim better. Since it's a pseudo-aquatic more or less. But yeah, Allo, whilst benefiting the most out of the three mid-tiers from packs, or mid-tier carnivores from packs, it really doesn't have a whole lot else. Yes, if you catch a Conca and a Serato off guard, they can kill you, but the exact same thing can be said for a Serato and a Conca catching an Allo off guard. It only takes a few hits from a Serato to even out the playing field between the two. And not the exact same for Conca. It takes a few more hits for Conca to even out the playing field, but Conca has the mobility compared to Serato to try evade Allo's moves, or not moves, attacks rather. So yeah, I think Allo's probably the worst mid-tier worst mid-tier for survival play. Unless you're in a group, in which case I would say Allo's probably the best. Serato and Conca both work better in my opinion for solos. Serato way more than Conca. Serato's kind of able to kill basically everything, not everything, but a lot of things. But we'll get to that later, and I'll explain why. But yeah, Allo's probably, unfortunately, the worst of the trio. Next we have Concavenator. I don't have a whole lot to say about Concavenator other than it's literally just a survivalist. Or your survivalist mid-tier. It's not exactly suited for combat unless it's against creatures generally smaller than it. It will struggle with things like Kentro and Allo, unless you get the jump on Allos and manage to get a few hits off on them. But as you will see in the gameplay, Concavenator's an insane swimmer. Concavenator does not care if something's chasing it on land. If it's faster than it, it will run into the water. And same goes, if it's in the water, it can just go on land. So yeah, Concavenator might not be amazing for combat, but survivability wise, it is very good. And it's not even terrible for combat. It's just statistically not as good as the other two mid-tiers. And even at that, it's still capable of keeping up with both of them. In terms of combat, if you play it correctly. So yeah, Concavenator, pretty awesome. Next we have Styra. Styra is just good. It's 30 armor, 26 attack, 300 health. It is just solid, and what it lacks for in its ability to fight, mainly just Allo, it makes up for in being able to escape basically everything else that can kill it. And it can fight off what can catch it. So it's just good. And I don't really have a whole lot to say about Styra. The only somewhat decent strat I could see to killing one that's a smart player is by trying to dehydrate it or starve it. But yeah, Styra, literally just a good creature. I think it's better than Conca just because of its stats, despite being pretty equal in terms of survivability. Next we have the moose of Dinosaur Arcade, Iguanodon. Iguanodon is pretty fucking terrifying for a lot of different reasons. First off, it is only one speed slower than Styra, which makes getting close to one pretty scary, because they're deceptively fast for their pretty large size. They have pretty good stamina. They do need to eat quite a lot, so you can starve them. However, it makes up for that weakness, and it's absolutely fucking just monkey brain health. It does have less damage and armor than Styra, but it has 130 extra health. And for only 1 less speed and a little bit less attack and 10 less armor, I think Iguanodon is just pretty much a better option in like every way. Especially for the fact that Iguanodon's a lot better suited for solo players. Styra benefits a lot more from herd, but it still is good for solos. Iguanodon can just, run around willy-nilly on a public server and do whatever it wants, without fearing much repercussion. The only things that it really needs to worry about are allo groups, which is the same thing as Styra, the same thing as Styra, but multiply them, because Styra can need to worry about like 1 allo. Iguanodon needs to worry about like a couple to 3, depending on how good the player is. The only issue with Iguanodon is, as I said, it can starve pretty easily, especially if it doesn't have upgrades. And also, if it's pinned against the water, it can struggle to get away. It has 11 sprint speed, or not sprint speed, swim in the water, which can be an issue for it. It does, however, have 15 walk, which makes it relatively decent at or just like walking away from things. Especially in a long chase, 15 walk can be pretty valuable. Obviously there's things with better walk, but 15 is pretty good. So Iguanodon might not have the best stamina, but it's enough so that it can get away from things and then just continue walking, whilst other things might have to sit down. And I think for those reasons, Iguanodon is better than Styra, just around the board, other than the fact that it starves a bit easier. But yeah, Iguanodon literally fucking mooses. Every encounter I've had with them on a public server when I've not been in a war has been like terrifying, because me and Xeno and stuff will be playing as smaller creatures. They will be chill 1 second and then absolutely bloodthirsty the next. I don't know what it is with Iguanodon players, but they're pretty scary, bro. But yeah, that's Iguanodon, and let's move on to the next creature. Unfortunately, this is where I'm gonna have to rank some pretty controversial creatures after this one. But next we have Cory. Cory is Concavenator and Suko, but awesomer. Think more agile than Suko, with a better jump and faster, with the same ability to swim, just a little bit slower, but you're still able to swim away from a lot of your problems, if you have any. Along with the fact that you're a herbivore, so gameplay is naturally easier for you, and also you're not even incompetent at combat. You might be a little, helpless against some creatures, but most of the time you're just going to be able to run away from them. And that is Corythosaurus. Corytho is very awesome for survival in general. It is a little faster in terms of walk speed than Suko. It's got 18 walk, which is honestly pretty solid. And also, it's got a pretty good jump height. Its crouch is one of the few useful crouches, because once again, it also makes itself slightly smaller, going into a quadrupedal stance as opposed to bipedal. Cory is just awesome, and as I said, Cory also doesn't give up the ability to swim, whilst only being a little statistically worse than Suko. You're giving up you're giving 4 speed, which doesn't sound like a ton, but it's quite a lot. You're gaining some armor. You're losing about 15 health, which you're losing a couple attack, but you're gaining agility, you're gaining stamina, you're gaining speed on land. You're not giving up your ability to swim with 16 swim speed and 17 sprint swimming speed, but that doesn't matter a whole lot, to be honest. Cory's just the second best starter. But yeah, Cory is just solid. Very good for survival. For combat, as I said, not as great. However, it makes up for that in the fact that it can literally escape and fight off basically everything. It might not be able to fight off apexes. It can just run away from the apexes. It might not be able to escape packs of Utahs and whatnot. It can pretty easily deal with them, or you can just swim away. Like there's a ton of options that you can pull with Cory, and I think that just being slightly faster than Suko on land, especially with the fact that because of its very fast walk speed, you're able to just constantly be on the move regardless of if something's chasing you or not. That's super beneficial. And yeah, Cory's just awesome. I can't sing Cory's praises enough. And it's not even giving up the fact, or it's not even like giving up entire combat, because you can still fight things with Cory. So yeah, it's just Suko but herbivore. You can spring that how you want, but yeah, Cory's just really good for what it is. The next creature we have is gonna have some people scratching their heads, and it is Spino, Spinosaurus, one of the apexes, and people are gonna be like, ooh, why is it so far down? I thought this was about survivability, and it is. The problem with Spino is just literally pressure from other creatures that puts it a lot lower. First, you have Giga, which is able to, deal with Spino on land. Now, you also have Hippo thrown into the fray, so that Spino has to deal with Hippos also in the water. You have Sukos, which Suko might not sound like a giant pressure to Spino, but it can be, especially if the Suko is a good player. A Suko can definitely kill a Spino on land. Maybe not in the water, but on land, a competent Suko will probably be able to kill a Spino. So yeah, you have three main pressures, or not three, but four-ish, and then that's not including other apexes that can kill Spino. You have Rex, Giga, Hippo, and Suko to a much lesser extent, and also Mastodon. However, that's not being, I should reiterate, Mastodon and Diplo are not being listed because they are broken right now. They can speed glitch and do various other things. But yeah, Spino has a ton of pressure from creatures like that, and adding Hippo has honestly just made Spino worse. Spino is really just struggling right now to keep its head above the water, figuratively. Spino can get killed by Rex, can get killed by Giga, can now get killed by Hippo, which can also swim, can get killed by Suko, but only in very, very difficult very, very rare scenarios, and can get killed by Mastodon because Mastodon can speed glitch. So, which is also somewhat rare for a Spino to die to, but it can still happen. And as a result, Spino's ability to traverse everywhere on the map is dampened, literally just because of the pressure from the other creatures. It makes Spino's abilities irrelevant. Why use Spino for its semi-aquatic nature when you can use literally Suko and be a lot safer? Spino is better than the creatures that have listed before it, obviously, literally just because of its stats. And yeah, Suko can lose to Hippo in a face tank, can lose to Rex, can lose to Giga, and because of that, Suko, I feel, pretty much has to rely on AI. Suko can't fight Anki, Suko can't fight Parasaur, Suko can't fight Trike, Suko can't fight Mammoth. And those are all big apexes that most of the times pretty prominent. You also might not even be able to fight stegos depending on the environment that it's in. So yeah, Spino's really suffering. I don't know if I can say it's from power creep because old creatures are still handling just fine. I think it's mainly just because Spino doesn't have an it factor compared to those other creatures because it's slow, it's very, very big with a giant hitbox on its back that's easily, rangeable from some creatures, especially depending on the environment. If you're in an area with a lot of high ground, you just have to deal with it because they can just hit your sail. It's just Spino's in a really rough spot for an Apex. But yeah, people are probably not going to be happy about that, but it's honestly the truth. Spino can't do a whole lot to the things that I listed other than Mastodon and Suko, but those are those are entire tier lower at Suko or Pseudo Apex, and Spino still has to somewhat worry about them depending on the situation. So, yeah, I personally think that Spino is just the worst Apex by far, but this isn't going to be as controversial as the next pick, so let's get into that, and I'll explain why it's super controversial. Next is a creature that a lot of fucking people are going to be confused about. Now, let me put a quick disclaimer on this one. You can either argue that Brack is the best creature, or you can argue that it's kind of mid. And you are right in both cases, and let me explain specifically why. Brack has the best stats in the entire game, but it has one ginormous weakness, and it is its hunger and its ability to be starved out. I just need to preface that this placement does not mean Brack is bad at all. Brack is. I actually wanted to put Brack closer to the number one spot. However, Yoshi and Zeno voted against that because of its giant glaring weakness and its hunger, and I agree. I agree with this as well as it being in close to number one, if that makes sense. I can see both trains of thought. Brack is just it's so easy to starve out, especially if you're playing the game like a survival game. And it's two main weaknesses. One, you're gonna struggle to secure kills, especially if you're solo, and two, your food. Especially if that's super prefaced if you're a solo player. In wars, your food isn't really an issue unless you're actively being stalled out by an enemy team. Um, so, but yeah, Brack is by far the most powerful creature in the entire game. Statistically, in practice, you kind of struggle to secure kills as a solo player. In a group, you're also all gonna. If a group of Brackies, you're all gonna struggle to secure kills. And in a war, you're just Brack. You're a big tank, and everyone's gonna be spamming Brack anyway. So why does it matter? But yeah, that's it. Once again, I want to reiterate, Brack is mainly here because of its hunger issue, and it's an inability to secure kills in a solo format. Um, yeah, it's just hard to justify putting it much higher when its weaknesses are so glaring, and especially as a solo where where this list is mostly prioritizing, you're really gonna struggle, especially if you're up against competent people who know that Brack's biggest weakness is its hunger. Um, so yeah, as I said, you could if you want to put Brack significantly higher than this, I completely understand, but especially for a solo, Brack just is gonna struggle a whole lot, and so yeah, that's why it's kind of low. But by no means does this mean Brack is bad. Next on the list we have Stego, and with Stego there's not a whole lot that you can say other than its stats kind of make it pretty good, or like not pretty good, but really good for combat. But for PvE specifically, you can starve and dehydrate really easily. You can't really escape what can kill you, and some of the things that can kill you can just catch you anyway. So, but generally speaking, Stego is probably going to be one of the better creatures in the game for PvP in general. In a war scenario, just not in a. If you're playing the game like a survival game, it's not going to be great because you can starve it and whatnot. But yeah, Stego, not bad for survival, pretty good, but it's combat's really what carries it. Next is Theory, and Theory is kind of just a blender of doom that can starve and dehydrate relatively easily. Um, not It's pretty interchangeable with Stego. Fairy can be kind of easy to play around, especially in a war scenario because it's not super fast. Like 27 sprint isn't a slouch, but it's definitely not super duper fast. But the main thing that carries Theris to such a high spot is its DPS. Its DPS is one of the highest in the game, if not the highest, if I remember correctly. And its main problems are it is a glass cannon for a start. If you compare its health to other creatures in its quote unquote tier, then you'll notice that Theris' health is kind of lacking. And you can also starve and dehydrate it pretty easily, same with Stego. Their combat is. Theris a lot better for survival, or for if you're playing the game like a survival game. For war combat, is not as good. And it's relatively interchangeable with Stego if you're playing it like a survival game. Or not a survival game, but if you're considering all the criteria at once, it's interchangeable with Stego if you're looking for a creature that you want to play as. But yeah, Theory, basically just interchangeable with Stego. It's a glass cannon for the most part. It's really high DPS, but other than that, you can starve it and dehydrate it relatively easily. And it's not got a ton of range. So yeah, interchangeable with Stego for the most part. Next, we have another interchangeable trio in Packy, Utah, and Smilodon. The reason these three are all interchangeable is they're all very similar statistically, whilst all of them are functionally very similar. Um, However, in my personal opinion, Packy is the best just because it's a herbivore, and herbivores naturally have easier gameplay than carnivores, especially on a public server. In a situation where you can't find NPCs and all you can find is players, it can definitely be stressful, especially if you're playing as a smaller carnivore like Smilodon or Packy, or not Packy, Utah rather. But that being said, they can escape basically everything. If you play these, we're starting to get into the creatures where if you play these creatures right, especially in a survival game scenario, you will never die. Um, Packy specifically is the easiest of the three because it's a herbivore, so in my opinion, it's better. But for combat, Utah and Smilodon are probably going to be slightly better, despite Packy being statistically slightly better than both of them in tankiness regards. Um, Packy also does feel like it's the easiest to starve, but as I said, it's a herbivore, so that's not exactly a giant issue for it. Smilodon has the best range of the three, but Utah has, you know, better stamina and whatnot. Smilodon's a couple speed faster. You can see why this is starting to get kind of muddled up in which one of these three is better, considering they're so statistically similar and they're all functionally very similar. They all have a very high jump. They'll have a lot of stamina. They all are pretty fast. Like their only issue is they can just like get shut out by things that can swim or fly. If you're trying to hunt something that can swim as Utah or Smilodon, they're just gonna run away from you because you can't chase them because you're too frail to risk going into the water and being killed by something a lot bigger than you. And Packy can't run into the water for the same fear, and it's also just none of the three of them are great swimmers in general. But yeah. That being said, though, if you play these guys on land correctly, you will never die. You should not be dying as these creatures if you're playing them properly. But yeah, obviously for combat, these creatures aren't going to be great, but for survivability, these guys are really good. As I said, Packy probably goes above Utah and Smilodon for me specifically because it's a herbivore, so its gameplay is just naturally easier. But other than that, these three are very interchangeable, and yeah, that's kind of just it for these three. For this next one, specifically speaking on the gameplay, dude, what the fuck? Excavator's so dumb, I hate Excavator, but yeah, next we're on to another relatively interchangeable pair, Trike and Rex. With Trike and Rex specifically, they're really just stats, and Rex is a lot lower than it probably should be, simply for the reason it's the same thing as Brack. You can starve it really easily, like super duper easily in Rex's case as well, just because it doesn't have the raw stats to keep things away from it. Like if you're a coordinated pack of Utahs or Smilodons or anything like that, Allos, probably not Carno. Carno would probably like get traded with because it can't hit for shit, but yeah, you can starve out a Rex very easily. Otherwise, Rex would be significantly higher. Um, as for Trike, Trike is kind of just pushed out of combat meta right now for the most part, and also there's just better options, which is why it's been bumped down quite a lot. Mammoth and Hippo are both like just objectively better options than Trike right now, especially if you're wanting things that can fight off creatures, whilst also having good survivability. Trike doesn't. Trike has that, but there's a lot of creatures that do it way better than Trike. And for Rex specifically, you can just starve it out very easily. But statistically, these are some of the best Apexes in the entire game. So take that as you will. With Trike and Rex specifically, Rex is a bit faster with more attack, but with less health and less defense. Rex also has probably like one of the worst metabolisms in the entire game, so yeah, you can. It's pretty hard to play around that, especially if you're in a populated public server and you're a solo. You kind of need a coordinated pack to be able to make Rex work to its highest degree, and that can be difficult. Especially with lack of competent players, it can definitely be difficult to get food with Rex. So yeah, but I don't know, they're relatively interchangeable for the most part. Next, we have one of the silliest additions in a long time to the game, and it's Dimetrodon. Dimetrodon is so silly. So if we look at its stats, Dimetrodon has 28 swimming speed, 34 sprint speed, the highest stamina in the entire game. It has very good attack for its size. Its health is kind of lacking, but then you realize this thing's doing 25 damage compared to Smilodon and Utah and other creatures that would be considered in its tier, for only slightly less health and slightly less armor, and it can swim, and it's fast, and it's got the most stamina in the entire game. This creature is absolutely filthy. I don't know what they were thinking when they were adding it. Its only real downside is it can be kind of frail. However, that doesn't really matter when you can escape literally, like, basically every land creature in the entire game, and you can escape a majority of the semi-aquatic roster. The only thing that really gives Dimetrodon problems, funnily enough, is Baryonyx. And that's literally just because if a Baryonyx ambushes a Dimetrodon, it can hit it enough times to the point that Dimetrodon can't run away. However, Dimetrodon is one of those creatures where if you see something that you don't want to fight coming, it will never see you again. You can just run forever. It is so silly, and the only reason that it is so low is because it's kind of its hitbox is kind of exploitable. Because of its big sail, it kind of has the issue where if it tries to fight things in the water, it can get hit, and terrain can definitely play against its sail. However, survivability-wise, this is one of the best creatures in the entire game, and its attacking stats and whatnot also don't even drag it down at all. and it can swim very fast, and it can rest on the bottom of the water and stuff. It's like, I don't know what they were thinking adding Dimetrodon the way it is. Dimetrodon, in my opinion, makes things like Utah, Smilodon, Packy, it makes those things entirely just not worthwhile to play for me specifically, because Dimetrodon, if I play it properly, I will never die to anything. If I see literally anything coming, I'm gone. You will never see me again, because I will run until I run out of stamina. I will sit for 5 seconds, get like some stamina again, and then run even more. And there's nothing that anyone can do about it. So yeah, unless you're like able to catch a Dimetrodon off guard, you literally should never be dying as it, unless you're like trying to take stupid fights. But yeah, Dimetrodon, really good. I can't sing its praises enough. It's really fun. If you didn't get it during Black Friday, then rip Bozo. It's one of the funnest creatures in the entire game. I love Dimetrodon so much. Alright, so next we have another silly creature, and that is Ceratosaurus. And Ceratosaurus is one of the best creatures in the entire game for survivability. Getting straight into it, its swim speed is 11, not terrible. Its sprint speed is 37. Its stamina is not bad. 250 health, 20 attack, which is slightly less than Dimetrodon, but still really good. And it has some of the best hit reg in the entire game, which makes it an absolute menace for fighting things like Allos, Sparry, sometimes even Sucos. You can 1v1 with Cerato, especially after its tankiness was adjusted. Cerato is, in my opinion, by far the best mid-tier in the entire game. You can outrun other mid-tiers if you don't want to fight them. You can fight them, especially if you become good at ambushing. You can literally kill every mid-tier in the entire game. The only things that really will give you trouble are apexes, but if you get 2 Ceratos, you will literally just like walk through them, especially if you're both combat. Cerato's just really easy to survive with combat-wise and PvP-wise. For war specifically, because the meta is kind of just spamming things that are super tanky, it's not super great for that. However, if you're playing the game like a survival game, Cerato is probably the best creature, especially if you want to play in a manner where you're just attacking things all the time. If you're just KOSing, like I like to KOS with my friends sometimes, a group of Ceratos will cleave through a server pretty easily. This creature's really silly. Them adjusting Allo and Cerato really made Cerato just infinitely better. Its hit reg is the main factor as to why it's so good for combat, but its other stats make it so that its survivability is very high. It can fight off what can kill it. It can generally kill what can kill it. Especially if you get the jump on it. You can outrun a lot of what can kill you. You're just really good. Cerato is one of my favorite creatures in this entire game to play. Design-wise, not so much, but yeah, I fucking love Cerato, and I know a lot of other people do as well. So yeah, Cerato, really fucking good creature. Can't sing its praises enough. You could put it interchangeable with Dimetrodon, because Dimetrodon's survivability is probably better, but I think Cerato's survival combat, and you could say war combat, is a really good creature for tacking on damage sometimes, but that's in very niche scenarios, and there's other better creatures like Parasaur, which we'll get to in a bit. But yeah, Cerato is just silly, especially if you're playing it like a survival game. If you're ambushing things and whatnot, Cerato is probably going to be the best creature in the entire game for you. So yeah, Cerato, it's really silly, and it's probably my favorite mid-tier in the entire game. Alright, here's another silly creature. Sauropalta is probably the best mid-tier in the entire game for just dueling. Alright, getting straight into it. You can beat the dog shit out of every other mid-tier, including Cerato. You can have fights with apexes, and they will somewhat be close. Not super close, but close enough to the point that you're like, what the fuck is Sauropalta made of? It is super tanky. It's not super slow. You can't dehydrate it. You can't starve it. Generally speaking, packs of smaller creatures can't deal with it at all. And the things that can kill Sauropelta, it can literally just run away from. Sauropelta is so fucking silly, and I don't understand why it still hasn't been adjusted. But I love Sauropelta. Sauropelta is so fun. I love fighting packs of Allos and whatnot with just one Sauropelta, because it's so silly how strong Sauropelta is. It's just probably one of my favorite herbivores in the entire game, just because of how silly statistically it is. It's super tanky, it's super strong, it's just epic. I love Sauropelta. Everyone should use Sauropelta, especially if they're wanting chill gameplay. Next creature we have is fucking Hippo. This thing being added really put a ton of pressure on Spino, and Spino really just can't, you know, deal with it, especially in a survival situation where if you need to hunt a hippo, it's going to be really difficult, especially if it's in a herd. The thing with Hippo is, not only is it a herbivore, not only is it statistically good enough to tank Spino, it's also ridiculously fucking fast for some reason. It has 26 sprint, which doesn't seem like a ton, but whilst you're actually like fighting it, you will notice Hippo is very fast, Hippo is very tanky, Hippo can tank Spino if it forces to trade hits, but Spino can range it, but that doesn't really matter a whole lot if the Hippo gets a jump on the Spino. It's really silly. Hippo can run away from like everything else that can kill it, and it can fight off like a lot of the things that can't kill it. It's really silly. Being able to just get into the water and not have anything be able to contest you is really dumb, in my opinion. The only thing it can contest Hippo is Spino, and Spino has a really hard time, especially if the Hippo player's got good terrain awareness. So yeah, Hippo gonna Hippo. It's literally like if you play Hippo properly, you shouldn't die ever. I fucking hate Hippo. Its existence irritates me. It's one of my least favorite creatures to play against. It's one of my least favorite creatures to play as. That's a lie. I love playing as Hippo. It's so overpowered. But yeah, Hippo's really dumb, and for some reason it won't me drink when I'm trying to record background footage, but whatever. But yeah, Hippo is so fucking stupid. I really hate Hippo, but it's really hard to disagree with how good Hippo is, especially for survival. Being able to just run into the water and just be safe is so silly. Like, the fish can't touch you, really, unless there's like 2 or 3 of them, and that's very rare, and it's mainly just Rhizotis, because Rhizotis' attack is super high. And then what? You're just gonna run on land. Oh, there's a Spino. Oh, looks like I'm gonna trade hits with it so that I can win. Oh, there's more than one Spino. I'm just gonna run away on land. Oh, there's a T-Rex. Fuck that. I'm going back in the water. I'm gonna escape the T-Rex and then run away menu. Hippo is so stupid, and I hate its existence, and it irritates me, and there were so many better options for creatures they could have added, but no, they added Funny Moto, and I fucking hate Hippo. It's kind of a rant a little bit for this one, but I fucking hate Hippo so much. Its existence just irritates me. But yeah, that's Hippo. Not a whole lot else to say on it, except from, ooh, Hippo. I love Hippo. I hate Hippo. Fucking Hipposaurus. Next we have Giga, and there's not a whole lot I can say about Giga except from it is the #1 apex carnivore for survivability. If you didn't know, Giga has one of the best walk speeds in the entire game. Giga's also got very good stamina for an apex, and statistically only a little bit worse than Rex, making it basically impossible to escape from unless you are unless you're something like Packy, Utah, Smilodon, Orny, Galley, Tupa, or Micro. And I should say this again, this video, or most of this video was made before Tupa's addition, but yeah, because of that, or Tupa's, placement might be a little bit wonky. I'm kidding, Tupa's placement's awesome, but yeah, a lot of this was made before Tupa's addition, or was added, but Tupa's addition literally changed, like, literally maybe one creature's, placement, and you'll see what I mean when I get to that. But yeah, back on Giga, it's literally just survivalist Rex, and because of that, it's pretty high. Not only has it got good range, or not good range, but really good hit reg. I'm not sure how good its range is, but I know its hit reg is super good. I know that it can trot like everything down. I know that Giga can kill all the other Apexes, given that you're able to ambush them well. Giga has a very good sneak. Giga's just good. It's just, in my opinion, the best Apex in the entire game. In terms of carnivores, not a whole lot to say, but yeah, Giga's really good. Next, we have Mammoth, and there's not a whole lot I can say about Mammoth except from its trike, but better in basically every way. Mammoth is literally just bulkier, um, in terms of health, for slightly less damage, but if you use the bald mammoth skin, you have like way more range than any trike, and even regular mammoth, you still have quite a bit of range. I just think that mammoth is really good, and you can even play semi-aquatic mammoth if you really want to play, like that. Not a whole lot to say about mammoth. Literally just trike upgrade in my opinion. Its survivability is super high. It's pretty difficult to starve out, and yeah, mammoth is just awesome. You should use mammoth if you have it. Very good creature. Even though a lot of people think that it's just a trike side grade, it's really good, or it's, in my opinion, quite a bit better for survivability, and obviously it's better for combat with its bald mammoth skin. So yeah, mammoth is awesome. You should use Mamfred. Mamfred goes hard. Next is Paraceratherium, and Paraceratherium is a little low, and especially considering for how good it is, and for how good I said it is, and how good my how good is Paraceratherium video. And the only reason that it's really this low is because the other creatures are literally, like, basically unkillable from this point on if you play them properly. Other than, like, one that is just better than Paraceratherium, and we'll get to that. However, Paraceratherium is literally just silly. Paraceratherium is one of the tankiest creatures in the entire game, for a start. It is very fast, having the same movement speed as Mammoth, or, well, not movement speed, sprint speed as Mammoth. If you really want, you can drain your stamina and go submarine mode. It has some of the best stamina regen of any large creature in the entire game, which is absurd. It really shouldn't have that, considering how fast it is. Its range isn't bad, but its head hitbox is pretty exploitable, but if you play an open, flat ground, that's not an issue. And to top that all off, if you really want to, because of its swimming speed being 11, you can go semi-aquatic Paraceratherium without needing to drain all your stamina and go under the water, like some other creatures do. Parasaur's main drawback is it's very easy to displace, and because of that, it's a little bit underneath some other creatures on this list. But the main reason that it's lower than those other creatures is because, it's like Parasaur, a coordinated, like, 2 Rexes can kill a Parasaur. 2 Rexes can pretty, like, easily shut down a Parasaur. If you're in a herd, Parasaurs are basically unkillable. But generally speaking, literally nothing will be able to tangle with you because Rex duos are relatively rare. A Giga duo is probably going to have a lot harder of a time taking you down because Rex is generally just the better Apex for taking on other Apexes, even though Giga can do it. And with Paraceratherium being so bulky and so big, Rex and Giga and whatnot, especially if it's in a herd, are going to have especially if it's only a couple of them, maybe even 3, they're going to have a pretty hard time trying to displace you and trying to separate you, especially just because of how fast Paraceratherium is for its size, even though it really shouldn't be this fast. I really disagree with it being this quick. But yeah, it's kind of hard to starve out Paraceratherium, especially with upgrades. It is doable, but it's pretty difficult. It's a lot more difficult than something like Rex or Brack, per se. Yeah, Parasaur's just kind of silly, and I don't understand why it's so fast. And it's super tanky, and it's got pretty good hit reg. I'm not sure on its range, but its hit reg feels very good. The only issue with it is its stamina depletes kind of quickly, but that can be rectified by literally walking for a few seconds in between your sprints. it's just really silly. Paraceratherium is just by far one of the best creatures in the game. I think it should be adjusted. Like, the jump between Mammoth and Paraceratherium is very drastic, and I think that Paraceratherium should probably be looked at. However, we have something even fucking more ridiculous right, like, immediately after this. So, yeah. Yeah, next we have fucking Anki, so... And it's pretty ridiculous. Anki is so fucking stupid, and the videos in the background literally just explain why. Anki can tank Paraceratherium and still be kind of decent in terms of its health. And it also beats it in a general 1v1 depending on terrain. Anki is so fucking dumb, it's really difficult to starve and dehydrate because it's so tanky that it can just ignore you. And its stamina, like, quote-unquote nerf, was realistically a buff for Anki, because now it can get its stamina low and just run under the water, because it has 100 oxygen, so it can just run under the water and menu. Anki is just silly. It can almost tank 2 Rexes, which means if you're good enough at the game, you can probably kill 2 Rexes with Anki. Anki is just astronomically fucking stupid in terms of its stats. Anki is so silly, and it is the largest, like, this is the last quote-unquote large creature. It is so dumb. I cannot get over how good Anki is. I really don't like how overpowered Anki is, but if they made it any other way, Anki would probably be very unplayable. So, yeah. They kind of just have to have Anki be like that until abilities come out. So, yeah. Anki's really silly. It's the best large creature in the entire game. It literally will never fucking die if you play it properly. Fuck, Mince has hiccups. But yeah, Anki's really fucking good. It's silly. Next, we have one of the next few unkillable creatures. We have Gallimimus. Gallimimus, realistically, should fucking never be dying to anything. Gallimimus has some of the best mobility in the entire game. It is one of the fastest creatures in the entire game. It is very difficult to starve out. It's got a very high jump. It's just one of those creatures that is premiering in just agility and survivability. Its combat is obviously lacking as a result. However, Utahs aren't going to catch you. Smilodons are literally never going to catch you. Packy can't really catch you either if a Packy wanted to go herbivore kill mode. Gallimimus is just one of the best survivalist creatures in the entire game, and it's not frail or as frail as something like Orny or Microraptor to make it so that you're like, oh, I don't want to play this because it's super frail. Because it's not super frail, it's actually tankier than Dimetrodon in terms of overall health. So yeah, Gally's just, you should never be dying as Gally if you're playing as Gally properly. If you want to never die as Gally on a public server, go to some fucking big open plain, and then just like sit on a rock, and then whenever something comes that can relatively get close to you, you run away. That is literally it, and because you're an omnivore, you can just live out your days eating fucking plants. Gally just shouldn't ever be dying, and if you're dying as Gally, then skill issue. Gally's awesome. I literally have nothing else to say. Gally's just one of the best survivable creatures in terms of survivability. Apply everything I just said, bar the mobility, and apply it to Arthropleura for a more generalized kit. Arthropleura has the ability to climb literally every surface in the entire game, which makes it so that it literally should never be dying. Especially if you're playing it properly. It's, like, awesome. Arthropleura should literally never be dying. It has 30 oxygen as well, so you can hide under the water for a little bit if you really need to. It's not even like Arthropleura is like slow. It's pretty fast, and its stamina is decent, and it can climb every surface in the entire game, so why am I even telling you that? You can literally hide on anything. Arthropleura, another one of those creatures where you literally should not be dying ever, because you have all the tools to literally never die. And it's an omnivore, so again, you will be in one of those scenarios where, you know, nothing's gonna be able to fucking kill you if you just pick an area and then just decide to live there forever. And then you see something take everything I said about Gallimimus and then just amplify it with Orny. Orny is quite a bit more frail. However, Orny literally should never be dying to anything. Orny has the best jump height in the entire game. Orny is one of the fastest creatures in the entire game. You can't really starve it out because it's so fast that it's just gonna escape. Arthropleura could be argued to be better than Orny, but in my opinion, Orny is literally the premier #1 survivalist in the entire game when it comes to creatures that don't have broken abilities. So yeah, Orny takes a cake in my opinion over Arthropleura, mainly just because it's just Galley but better in terms of survivability. There's literally nothing you can say. But if you want something slightly more tanky, you pick Galley. If you want something that is more agile, better jump, faster, so on, you pick Orny. It is just the greatest thing ever for not dying. Next, we have the second best creature in the entire game. Fucking Microraptor. If you couldn't tell by the gameplay, Microraptor can glide, which basically makes it untouchable to a majority of the roster. Unless you can the only issue is if you can catch it off guard, you can kill it. However, if you're playing Microraptor properly, you should never be leaving trees or mountains, ever. And you should always be aware of your surroundings due to how frail you are. The only thing you can realistically fight is Dodo. However, you can fucking fly, basically, so you're never gonna die if you play properly. You shouldn't be fighting anything because you're Microraptor. You're like, one of the smallest guys in the entire game. But you can fucking fly. So, yeah. It's kind of like the Beast of Bermuda effect, where until there's more flyers added, Microraptor will remain to be the second best creature in the entire game. And just lumping it in there, it is pretty obvious that Tupa is #1. Tupa not only is just... It's basically Microraptor, but better in every way. And I believe it's a herbivore. So yeah, Tupa's literally just Microraptor upgrade. You should never be dying with either of these creatures. Yeah, that's the list. Kind of anticlimactic. The #1 and 2 best creatures are literally the only things that can fly. Can you believe that? I think everyone can believe that. But yeah, these are by far the best creatures in the entire game, and simply because they might not be able to fight anything, however, they can literally escape everything given that you play them correctly. And by play them correctly, sit on an advantage point and look around, and that is literally it. And then you will literally never die. So yeah, that is the end of the tier list. Microraptor and Tupa beat out everything, including Orny and Arthro and a lot of other creatures that I assume a lot of people would have wanted on this list to be very high because of their survivability based on the criteria. But no, it's just these two. The two best creatures in the entire game, Tupa and Microraptor. Yeah, that's just it.